Disclaimer: this content is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. It started as one of those late nights when the world felt quiet, and everything slowed down just enough for small moments to feel bigger than they should. The sound of rain tapping against the window, the faint hum of soft music, and the glow of a single lamp painted the room in warmth. He was sitting on the couch, relaxed, scrolling through his phone, while I sat nearby, pretending to read, but my mind was elsewhere. The kind of stillness that lingers between two people who've been close for a while, yet something unspoken keeps pulling them closer, quietly, invisibly. I don't even know what made me say it. Maybe it was the long week, or maybe I just wanted to feel cared for. I turned to him and said softly, "My back hurts, can you rub it for a minute?" He looked up, surprised at first, then nodded with a small smile that made my heart beat a little faster. He shifted closer, and for a moment, neither of us said anything. Just the sound of rain and my heartbeat filling the silence. When his hands first touched my shoulders, it felt innocent. Warm palms, gentle pressure. The kind of touch that's comforting, not complicated. But then, something changed. The air in the room felt heavier. Every slow motion of his hands made the space between us smaller, and I couldn't decide whether to lean in or pull away. His voice was quiet when he asked if it felt better. I said yes, but that wasn't the full truth. It wasn't just my back that ached anymore. He lingered, fingertips tracing lines down my spine, as if memorizing them. I could feel him breathe behind me, slow and uncertain. And I realized this wasn't just a simple back rub anymore. There was something else under it, years of hidden glances, jokes that almost meant something, and moments we never dared to name. Everything we'd kept buried was suddenly there, right in the open, between his hands and my skin. I turned slightly, meeting his eyes for the first time in what felt like forever. The look he gave me was both a question and a confession. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't wrong. It was just real. The kind of moment that makes you forget the world exists outside that tiny room. Then, just as he leaned closer, his phone buzzed. A single vibration that shattered the quiet and brought us back to reality. He froze. I did too. His hands stopped moving, and the warmth between us turned into something fragile. He glanced at the screen, and his face changed. I didn't ask who it was. I couldn't. So, what happens next? Do we pull away and pretend nothing happened, or let the silence answer everything we're too afraid to say? Tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were in that moment? After that night, things between us didn't go back to normal, at least not for me. The next morning, everything felt the same on the surface. Coffee brewed, the news played quietly in the background, and we talked about little things like errands and work. But every time our eyes met, there was this invisible line drawn between us, something that hadn't been there before. I kept wondering if he thought about it too, or if I was the only one replaying every second of what almost happened. I tried to convince myself it was just a moment that got out of hand, a misunderstanding maybe. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. There had always been something unspoken between us. The way he'd look at me when I laughed, or how his voice softened when he said my name. It wasn't obvious, but it was real. We had both ignored it for so long because life had its rules, and people expect you to stay in your place, even when your heart doesn't. A few days passed before we saw each other again. It was at a small gathering with mutual friends. I told myself I'd act normal, that I wouldn't think about the night in the rain. But the moment I saw him across the room, everything came rushing back. He was standing there, laughing at something, holding a drink, looking so effortlessly calm, as if that moment between us hadn't changed everything. When our eyes met, he smiled. It was polite, casual even. But the longer I looked, the more it felt like there was something hiding behind it. Later, when everyone else was caught up in conversation, we found ourselves alone in the kitchen. For a second, neither of us spoke. The air felt charged again, like the universe was holding its breath, waiting to see what we'd do next. He finally said, "About that night," but before he could finish, someone called his name from the other room. He looked away, took a slow breath, and said quietly, "Maybe we should talk about it later." I nodded, pretending not to care, though my chest felt tight. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every thought replayed like a loop. Was it just me feeling this pull? Or was he fighting the same storm inside? Maybe there were reasons he held back, reasons I didn't know yet. But the way he'd looked at me when no one else was watching told me the story wasn't over. Days turned into weeks, but that night still lingered like a shadow between us, quiet but heavy. We started seeing each other more often again, though always surrounded by people. Friends, coworkers, neighbors, anyone that kept the silence between us filled. And yet, no matter how crowded the room was, I always knew exactly where he was. It was like my senses had memorized him. Every time he laughed, every time his eyes caught mine, that familiar tension crept back in, reminding me of the moment that neither of us dared to talk about. Eventually, we did talk, sort of. It happened by accident one evening when I stopped by to drop something off. He was alone, sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee, the sunset painting everything gold. He looked up, surprised but calm. "You can sit," he said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I almost didn't, but curiosity, or something deeper, won over hesitation. The conversation started simple. Small talk. The kind that hides what you really want to say. But slowly, it shifted. He asked if I'd been okay lately, and there was something in his tone that made me feel like he wasn't just asking about life, he was asking about that night. I told him I'd been fine, maybe too quickly. He nodded, looking down, as if searching for the right words. "I didn't mean to make things uncomfortable," he said quietly. I wanted to tell him it wasn't uncomfortable. It was confusing, yes, but not wrong. But the words got stuck somewhere between my heart and my lips. Instead, I just said, "It's fine." A lie that sounded small even to my own ears. After that, silence stretched between us again, but this time it wasn't awkward, it was full of meaning. The kind of silence that speaks louder than words. He glanced at me, like he wanted to say more, but before he could, someone called from inside. He stood up, gave me a faint smile, and said, "Maybe some things are better left unspoken." That line stayed with me. Better left unspoken. But what if leaving things unsaid means losing something that could have been real? The thought kept me up that night. Maybe this wasn't just about attraction or curiosity anymore, maybe it was about timing, fear, and everything we weren't ready to admit. And there's another layer too, someone else noticed. A friend of his, someone close, started acting distant around me. The way she looked at us, the way her questions hinted that she knew. Suddenly, it wasn't just between us anymore. After that evening on the porch, things began to spiral quietly, like a slow storm you can sense before it breaks. Every interaction carried weight now. The space between us was filled with words we didn't say, glances we tried to avoid, and moments that lasted a second too long. It wasn't something we planned, but every time we were near each other, the air changed. People noticed. Especially her. Her name was Emily, his longtime friend. She had always been around, friendly and familiar. But lately, she watched us differently, her smiles tighter, her tone colder. I could feel her suspicion even in her silence. Once, during a group dinner, she looked straight at me and said, "Some connections are dangerous if you're not careful." It sounded casual, but the message behind it wasn't. He froze for a second, then changed the subject. But the tension at that table could have been cut with a knife. After that night, he started to pull back. Messages slowed down. Calls went unanswered. It was like he was trying to erase the gravity between us before anyone else could see it. But it was too late. What we felt had already grown roots, quietly wrapping around everything familiar. Every time he avoided me, it only made the pull stronger. And deep down, I knew something was coming, some kind of breaking point. Then, one late afternoon, it happened. I was leaving work when I saw him waiting near the parking lot. He looked tired, restless, like someone who'd been fighting himself for too long. He didn't say anything at first. Just looked at me, as if trying to decide whether to stay or walk away. Finally, he said, "We can't keep pretending this doesn't exist." His voice was low, steady, but heavy. Before I could respond, Emily appeared. She must have followed him, her expression said everything. "So it's true," she whispered, her voice shaking. I froze. He turned toward her, guilt written all over his face. The silence that followed felt endless. The wind blew through, carrying the sound of distant traffic, but all I could hear was my own heart pounding. He tried to explain, but she wouldn't listen. "You're risking everything," she said, her eyes glistening. "And for what?" Her words hit hard, not because they were cruel, but because they were honest. That night, everything changed. Lines were crossed, feelings were exposed, and the quiet world we built started to crack under the weight of truth. Now, there's no hiding anymore. The choices are standing right in front of us, truth or distance, courage or regret. But which one will we choose? The night after Emily confronted us, everything went quiet, but not in a peaceful way. It was the kind of silence that feels heavy, like something waiting to explode. I barely slept, turning over every word she said, every look he gave, every unanswered question that now hung between us. The truth was finally out, but instead of feeling free, it felt like we had stepped onto a thin line that could snap at any second. The next few days were strange. He didn't reach out, and neither did I. Maybe we both needed space to breathe, or maybe we were afraid to face what had just been uncovered. People started whispering too, nothing clear, just fragments. Someone said Emily had told a few friends. Someone else said they saw us that night by the parking lot. It was like a quiet fire spreading through dry grass. I didn't know how much longer I could pretend everything was fine. Then, unexpectedly, he showed up again. It was raining, just like the first night everything started. I was standing outside a cafe, about to leave, when I heard his voice behind me. "We need to talk." His tone wasn't calm this time, it was desperate. He looked worn out, his shirt damp from the rain, his eyes full of something between guilt and longing. Before I could say anything, he told me something I wasn't expecting. Emily hadn't just been upset, she'd been the one who'd always had feelings for him. For years. He never saw it, or maybe he ignored it, but after that night between us, she finally told him everything. She said I broke her, he whispered, his voice almost trembling. And maybe I did. I didn't mean to, but I can't lie anymore about what I feel. Hearing that made my heart twist in two directions. One part wanted to reach for him, to tell him none of this was his fault, that what we had wasn't built on intention but connection. But the other part knew this meant we weren't just caught in a moment anymore, we were standing in the middle of a choice that would change everything. Then came the real twist, he said he was leaving. "I got an offer out of state," he said quietly. "I wasn't going to take it, but maybe I should. Maybe it's the only way to stop hurting people." My chest tightened. The idea of him leaving, just when everything had finally surfaced, felt unreal. But I could see the exhaustion in his face, the way his eyes avoided mine like he was afraid of what they'd say. The rain kept falling, soaking us both, but neither of us moved. It was one of those moments where time feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for someone to speak first. And then, before he could walk away, I asked softly, if you leave now, will that really make it easier, or will it just make it harder to forget? He didn't answer. He just looked at me with that same uncertain look from the night it all began. The one that said everything without saying a word. The day he was supposed to leave came faster than I expected. I told myself I'd let him go quietly, that some things end better without words. But when I saw his car parked by the street, luggage in the back, and his hands gripping the steering wheel like he didn't really want to go, I knew silence would haunt me more than anything he could say. I walked up, heart pounding, unsure if I was doing the right thing. The air felt heavy, like the world itself was waiting for an answer. He looked at me through the window, eyes tired but soft, then stepped out without saying a word. For a long moment, we just stood there, rain clouds rolling in again, as if the sky remembered the night everything began. Finally, he said, I thought leaving would make it easier, but it doesn't. His voice cracked on the last word. Every time I try to walk away, I end up thinking about you. I took a breath, trying to steady my voice. Then why are you still going? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he handed me something small, a folded letter, damp at the edges from his hands. Because sometimes loving someone means knowing when to stop before you ruin what's good in them, he said softly. And I don't want to be the reason you lose yourself. I wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, that what we had wasn't something that needed to be erased. But before I could speak, Emily appeared. I didn't even notice her car pull up. She looked at both of us, her expression calm, too calm. For the first time, she didn't seem angry. I came to say goodbye too, she said quietly. You were right to leave. Then she turned to me and added, and maybe you were right to care. Her words didn't carry bitterness anymore, just a strange acceptance. It felt like everyone finally stopped fighting the inevitable. He looked at her, then back at me, torn between relief and heartbreak. He got into his car, started the engine, but before driving away, he leaned out and said, if it's meant to be, maybe it'll find its way back. Then he was gone. Just like that. For weeks after, life felt quieter, emptier, but somehow clearer. I opened the letter he'd given me only once. It wasn't long. Just a single line written in his messy handwriting. Sometimes distance is just another way love learns how to stay. And just when I thought the story had ended, a message popped up one night, his name lighting up my screen. The words were simple, I'm coming back. Weeks passed after his message, and I didn't know what to expect. A part of me thought he'd never actually return, that the message was just his way of closing the story gently. But then one evening, I saw him, standing by the same cafe where it all began. The rain had just stopped, the air smelling of wet earth and new beginnings. He looked the same, yet different, calmer, as if time away had taught him what words couldn't. We didn't rush toward each other. There was no dramatic moment, no music, no grand gesture. Just two people who had been through something real, finally ready to face it without fear. He smiled first, that familiar, quiet smile that once made everything else disappear. I didn't come back to start over, he said softly. I came back because I finally understand what staying really means. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of what would happen next. Maybe we wouldn't be perfect, maybe the world around us would still whisper, but that didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that the chaos had led us here, to something honest. I told him, maybe love isn't about choosing the easy path. Maybe it's about finding peace, even when everything else feels uncertain. He nodded, taking my hand. Then let's start from peace. The rain began again, soft and steady, but this time it felt different, gentle instead of stormy. Everything that had once been confusion now felt like clarity. It wasn't about the rush anymore, it was about the quiet choice to stay. As the lights from passing cars reflected on the wet street, I realized some stories don't end with fireworks, they end with understanding. And maybe that's the kind of love that lasts. What do you think? Did they finally find the right ending, or is this just another beginning waiting to unfold? Comment your thoughts below and tell me if you'd want a sequel to this story.